Thank you for coming today. Today we're going to talk about virtual computing here at New College, and joining us is Dave DeMizio. Come back up here. Okay. Okay. And we're going to go through like that. Hey, I thought it was appropriate for the title. We're going to be talking about virtualization, what it is, some different virtualization scenarios, and different ways where virtualization is used in general. We'll be talking specifically about where virtualization is used here at New College, and some future directions for virtualization, and what are some of the issues around that as we move forward. So please chime in if you have any questions. Okay. So what's virtualization? Okay. It's basically the ability of creating a virtual, rather than, a little tautology there, a virtual rather than actual version of something. For our purposes, it's specifically basically creating a environment on using hardware to simulate other hardware, or software to simulate other hardware, and using it, what it lets us do is it lets us more effectively and more efficiently use the equipment that we have. Virtualization is not a new concept. It's actually been around since the 60s in one form or another. And again, this ability to divide or use those resources more effectively. Okay. So there are different types of virtualization. We're not going to go through all of them today, but just talk a little bit about some of the types of virtualization. There's hardware virtualization. And what hardware virtualization does, it allows the user to run a guest operating system, or one type of hardware virtualization lets you run a guest operating system on a particular computer. Now that guest operating system can be the same OS that the computer runs. So you can run Windows with a virtual version of Windows running on it. You can run a Mac with a virtual version of Mac running on it, Linux, same sort of thing. Some examples of hardware virtualization, VMware Desktop and Parallels for the Mac. Both are virtualization packages that let you take the Mac and run Windows or another guest operating system on that machine while still running the host operating system. Okay, so we're not just saying, oh, it's now running, this Mac is now a PC. It's running Windows, it's Mac OS, it's running Windows OS or Linux OS on top of, basically as an application on top of the host OS. There's a version of this for Windows as well, VMware Workstation, that does the same thing in the Windows environment. And it lets you run full versions of it, of these other operating systems, and pretty well unrestricted, depending on the implementation. Okay? There's something called the hypervisor layer, which is a technology built actually into the Intel chips these days, that lets this run effectively and efficiently. And so virtualization, again, it's an efficient way. I have a Mac, but I need to run an occasional Windows application. I can use something like VMware Desktop or a VMware Player, which is a sort of a shortened version of that, simplified version of that, to run those applications without having to have a separate machine or for that purpose. Okay. The downside of this type of desktop hardware virtualization is that it runs on top of the native operating system. Good and bad. The downside is that I still have a native operating system running, and I have now this guest operating system running, so they're all going to take up lots more memory. So I need a machine that has enough memory, and it's also going to take up more disk space because I now have the disk space required for two copies of an operating system, or 3 or 4, or however many I have. So there's definitely performance concerns when you do this, because again, you spin up the second operating system. It's a big application that's running, right? So it's not something you want to do on a minimal system. So when Windows says it'll run in like 4 gigabytes of, or 4 megabytes, what is it? 4 gig of RAM?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, remember, you're doing that on top of another operating system. It needs space. It does become an issue. But it works, and it works well. And again, for people who just need to do an occasional, I need to run, like in the library, they need to run some of the applications occasionally. They don't need it all the time. They can open up the Windows session and do that. Okay. Some examples of hardware virtualization at New College. Server-based, and again, we were looking at desktop mostly there, but there's also server-based hardware virtualization. Most of our enterprise systems And shared applications here hosted at New College are virtualized, so student information system, Banner is not actually virtualized, parts of it are, but it's actually not even hosted here. But most of our systems that we run here are actually virtualized. We don't have a separate server for each of one of these services. They're running on shared hardware, and again, just efficiently being used. Server virtualization makes lots of sense because servers most of the time are just sitting there twiddling their thumbs. There's not a lot of activity actually for the CPU. They tend to, if anything, be more I/O bound, and so servers have lots of time to do lots of things at the same time. So that works well. Our website and Moodle are also virtualized. We don't host those here; they're hosted outside. In both cases, but those are not running on their own piece of hardware. They are virtualized applications as well. And again, it does allow for this better utilization of these resources. Okay. So desktop virtualization. So we're going to look at a couple of different desktop virtualization tools, and there's virtual desktop VDI infrastructure, and in a VDI environment, what happens is the local machine generally provides the input and output services, okay, to the server, and everything else is pretty much happening on the server side, but your computer is sort of the front end in a sense to it. But it is providing input and output, which means that you can use things like flash drives, depending on how it's configured, which is great because now I can move things back and forth, and I don't need to have this entire large image on my local computer. I don't need to worry about the licensing on my local computer. I need to worry about the licensing on these images, make sure I'm still good there, but I don't need to worry about all the licensing issues in the same way. At New College, we actually have two platforms that we've been rolling out and sort of testing, experimenting, and Dave's been doing a lot of the work with this. We have two platforms. One is called VMware Horizon. It's from a company called VMware. And it's used for our Windows-based virtual desktop environment infrastructure here, and I'll take you through that. We also have another VDI platform here called VCL, which is Virtual Computing Lab, and that was developed by North Carolina State, and it's now open source. It's part of the Apache project, and it's used for our Linux-based virtual computing lab. Right now, that's not actually working all that well, so we're not going to go into great detail on that, but it does work. There are pros and cons of both. The biggest advantage of the Horizon one is that it does give us things like access to things like flash drives and other resources like that. Okay. So Horizon. Let me go catch up on the slides here. So Horizon, first of all, to get to Horizon on campus or off campus, you go to this web link, https, if you leave off the S, it'll get there eventually, /vdi.ncf.edu, and it will pop up a window which is going to ask you to install the client if you don't already have it on your computer. If you do, or to use the web interface. So there's a downloadable application that you can download to your computer, install that software here, and continue from there, or you can use a web interface which has less functionality but is convenient if you're sort of running around from machine to machine. We'll see that in a minute. What's nice about it is both of these work actually on a tablet as well, or other mobile devices. So I can run Windows, and I can even run things like ArcGIS on my iPad, just by sitting here and pushing the buttons. By downloading either the Horizon or the web version. Either the Horizon client or the web version will work. And I'll take you through this instead of showing slides. Why don't we just go into it? So, I'm going to go to this website. edi.ncf.edu, and your favorite browser will work fine for this. Again, I could install the client or I can do the web access, so that's how I get to that site. If I've already installed the client, I don't need to come to this URL. I can actually just go to the client and bring it up, and there's a Windows client and there's a Mac client, and there are clients for pretty much everything. I just need to enter, again, the connection name. Again, it's going to be the same thing. It's vdi.ncf.edu. Once I've done this the first time, it will remember that.
Now, one difference between the client and the browser version is the client allows you to save data to your USB drive,
Yes.
where the HTML
Does not.
does not, so you have to save it to Dropbox or Google Drive.
Google Drive or something like that, right. So I think the key is if you're running it on your own computer, I would use the client. Why not? In the lab machines here, I'm not sure if we've installed the clients yet. We probably should as part of the re-imaging next year. And that way, people can do it that way as well. It has some advantages. Okay. You'll notice it pops up a little warning saying, hey, after 3 hours, you're going to get kicked off this. But you can get basically 3 hours. You have 3 hour, basically you're getting a session that's 3 hour session that you can use, and then you can re-sign up again. We have a limited number of seats for all of these platforms, so we have to share the resources. Okay. I click in, it's going to ask me to log in, username, enter your new college credentials, leave the domain as network. And once I log in, it's going to then show me what are the available images. So I can have multiple images. We can have different labs configured. And the idea here is that we will have different labs. So we might have a social science lab. We might have a lab that's being used in, say, the data analytics program, data science program. What we have right now is we have sort of a general lab for social science. It includes all of the SAS software and GIS software and various other applications. And then Dave created a very simple lab for us with just like Office and Chrome. So again, lots of our students don't necessarily have access to Microsoft Office on their computer. They can come in here, they can run Office right off of this. So I'm going to start by just picking the simple lab. Actually, I'll go for the bigger lab. I don't think there's any real time difference in starting it up. Okay. It does take a couple of minutes, or about a minute and a half or so, to spin it up the first time, or when you first have a reservation, because what it's actually doing is it's building a desktop for you. Again, as we move forward with this, there are other ways that we can create these images that may be faster. We are sort of in this test stage here, trying to decide how we go. So it will take a couple of minutes. It will say, welcome, but you'll notice my Mac now looks like it's pretty much a Windows machine. You know, it's faster than a bunch of machines still. And once into it, it's fine. The response actually is quite good. It's this initial starting. In fact, in my 3 hour lease period, if I go to it, go out of it and come back into it, it's right up. It's immediate. So it's just this beginning of the session. Go get some coffee. And we are working with VMware to determine are there ways for us to speed up this part of the process. It's the same if you use the web interface. You're just sitting on the web browser that much longer. Doesn't make any difference. And we'll go back and forth, and I'll show you actually back and forth into that. So, how's your week? No. Any questions?
If I want to refer back to this, is there information on the portal or anything about this for you guys?
Yes, there is help available on the portal on the IT website. If you can find it, I'll be impressed. But it is there. Like everything in the portal, you have to dig a bit, but there is information about it. You'll notice, okay, so now it's come up. Again, it warns me once again, I got 3 hours to go. But now I'm on my Windows session here, and if I want to run something, and I'm still on a Mac though, because you can see the toolbar pop up there. The what?
Yeah.
This is the Horizon client running. Yep. And I can actually run it in a window instead. So if I wanted to, I don't have to run full screen. Right. Well, so this is the Windows client running, and right, I can go into Eclipse here. I can go into Visual Basic. We've added that here. I can go to Python. I can, just open up. Want to go into Eclipse. So if I'm taking a programming class and I have a Mac and I need to get to, say, a particular resources only, like Visual Basic, We have a student who's doing a class where he needed Visual Basic. He has a Mac, instead of having to work at one of the lab machines here, Dave added the Visual Basic, the Visual Studio tools to the image, and he can get to it now from anywhere. Okay. The only key is he has to remember that he has to save from his flash drive. So what's nice about this is, you'll see up here, do you want to run this file? Sure, go for it. You'll see up here a little thing that says flash drive, so I can tell it I want to plug in a flash drive. And I don't necessarily want to automatically connect one inserted. That's sort of up to you. Select a workspace, so I'll go there, sure. So Eclipse is starting up. In the meantime, my flash drive should be here. Yes, it is. So I can now grab my flash drive. Continue. And there it is, installing the device driver. So again, I'm sort of in this nice Windows environment where I can do all that type of stuff.
Is that the only local place you can save to from this?
The only local place. You can't map your can you map your hard drive?
Yeah, you can. And actually, it maps your AD, whatever maps in AD.
But not for students,
No.
because students don't have that, right? But so now I'm running Eclipse, and if I want, I can write a Java program. I'll quit out of that for now. But I also have my flash drive here. Right, so it has my network SharePoints here, which I never use, but I have them there. And if I want to take this PowerPoint presentation here, I can drag it to the desktop. I can work on it, or I can just open it up off the flash drive and save it there. Probably a better approach, potentially. And go to town on that. Here we go. Okay, do whatever I want with that. I want to get out of this. 'Cause first of all, I'm on a Mac still. I still have my native operating system running here. I can go run something else if I want to. Right? So I can still do whatever I want. And I can just come back. Again, I get 3 hours, so I can work locally and remotely. This is really having no impact on my computer itself. It's just a small, not a terribly large application that's running, so performance is really not a big hit on the local machine. And again, the big difference between the client version, running that Horizon program application, versus the web version. On the web version, I don't have access to things like my flash drive. I'd have to use Google Drive or Dropbox or something like that to save my files. And on the web version, are my SharePoints mapped?
Yes.
So for those who have SharePoints, they still be mapped. We'll find out in a moment, because I'm going to quit this. I'm going to disconnect. If I disconnect, it doesn't delete the reservation; it just disconnects it.
After 30 minutes, it'll...
Right. So what's going to happen is if you go away for a half hour, when you come back, it will have disconnected you. Now, this is important because during that 3 hour period, as long as you're actively working, or again, don't go away for more than a half hour, it will continue to work, but it's going to, and it will save whatever you've done on that desktop. After that 3 hours, it starts over. It's like our lab machines when someone logs off and logs back in. It's sort of like having deep freeze, in a sense, on them. They start over clean again. So you do want to make sure that you are saving somewhere else. So now I'm using the web interface. You'll see it says up here, vdi.ncf.edu, and I'm just going to sign in here now. Again, I get the choice of which labs. I'm going to go back into the same one I was in, and this should come right up. Because again, I already built that desktop, and there's that orientation file right here again that I dragged there from the flash drive. Again, I don't have access to the flash drive now, but if I go to computer, I still have access to my shared drives.
Is that because you still have a client running?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just I can quit the client. Yeah, the client's not doing anything at this point. But again, it's not. It's the way the image is.
It looks at your AD profile, and map and drive.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter which way you're doing it for that. What you don't, again, what the client, local client does, it gives you hardware access on the local machine,
Right.
which is what I don't have if I'm using the web version. On the other hand, with the web version, I can do it anywhere, right? I can do it again. I don't need to download a client if it's not already there. If I'm on a machine where that client doesn't exist yet, I don't have to worry about the fact there's no client on that machine. I can still get to it. Right? And again, I'd recommend for our students, they don't have SharePoints anyway. They use Google Drive or they use Dropbox or something. So they're used to working that way with our lab machines now. But again, even here, I can come back in here again, and once again, if I can find it, I can run Eclipse. So. Okay. Or, you know, again, I can go, there's Chrome, there's GIS on, ArcGIS is on here. We got it all. Okay. So I'm on a machine that can't run ArcGIS, but I can run ArcGIS. And one of the things that we've learned is things like ArcGIS, which take a lot of horsepower. It would be better to have that in a system where, again, we don't need to upgrade all our lab machines for that to do it. So, catching up on these screens there. Okay.
Is the browser version any slower at all or anything? Because it's all network dependent?
I don't think it's notably slower. Yeah, I mean, I just, yeah.
It's fine.
There's real no, I mean, your network connection is going to be your biggest issue here. So if I'm on campus on a good spot on a good connection, I'm probably fine. If I'm in a place with lousy internet, it's not going to be great.
It's pretty big. You're on Wi-Fi now.
I'm on Wi-Fi now. Yep. Yeah, I don't think you'll see any real performance issues. You'll notice here on the web version, there's this little, you might be able to see this little sort of tabby thing at the top of the screen. That lets me pull down, I can get to some of the controls. One of the controls I get to is send Control-Alt-Delete, which if you're on a Mac, that's a difficult keystroke to do because there is no Control-Alt-Delete keystroke that generally works that way. So, but if I do that, it will actually send me Control-Alt-Delete. The client has the same sort of button for that. Cancel. And I can do the same thing from my iPad. So if I go to the, I'm going to do the client there, and I'll bring the iPad up on the screen.
So it's like an app.
It is an app. Yep. It is a Fusion. There's a Horizon app for this. Okay, we do that so that no one tries to hop on here while we're not there. Okay. And if I find the Horizon app, cancel, and I'll say connect to that, accept. It's possible I just disconnected my session after I'm starting over, but we'll see. Everyone getting to see my password? Good.
Quick memory.
Yeah, if I
Well, we are
remember.
recording this.
Yeah, well. Guess I'll be changing my password now. Huh? Okay. I will edit that out. We'll be editing that out. Yes. So here we are. So here's our screen there. It's actually kind of cool. There's a little controller in the middle, which is hard to see. But you click on it, and then you click that, and it gives you what the display resolutions and all that stuff. There's this little icon there that, there it is. You can see it there.
One finger, two fingers.
Yeah, I'm using with my finger. So I can make the whole thing a trackpad.
What's the little tab on the left?
The little tab on the left is the, shows you what's running, yeah. It's kind of cool. So, But again, if I wanted to come in and, just for fun, running clips again, which, by the way, one thing I did notice, these things move around, like, is the problem with putting icons on the screen. Trust me, it's there. This is why there's something in Windows called the Start button. You go down to the Start button, and you go to All Programs, and you go to whatever program you want. And I'm having, there we go, scroll down. For now, I'm just going to run anything. I don't really care. The next CP, fine. Okay. And close. So, kind of cool. I'm going to close out of that. Turn off the iPad. Would have been good to do that before. Go back to here. Give me a number. Or not. Here we go. Try that again.
Make the app for phones too?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you can download it for your phone as well. Just, I mean, just get on the App Store.
You can probably definitely use
The web client.
the web client.
It'd be a little small.
Yeah.
Be a little painful, but I think you can do it.
You're in a pinch, you really need to look at something.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it is not probably the way I would want to.
It's probably good if you wanna, if you're away somewhere, you wanna start something, and then come back like, in an hour, and then get on the computer, and then
You can start the desktop getting built.
yeah.
Just get back in 30 minutes. Plan ahead. I'm showing up there. Yeah, having problems. Wi-Fi.
VDI, NCF.
Yep. I've lost the Apple TV apparently. One moment. Technical difficulties. This hasn't happened all year. Right. So that's the iPad client. Let's take you through the next part here.
Now, even the half hour parameter, it's all it can be changed. It's just something that we've implemented just so there's enough seats for everyone.
And again, I think we're at the point now where we're just really trying to start rolling it out to see how people are going to use it and where they're going to use it. And again, can we create images that make more sense in terms of, for different distances? Does it make sense to one image that everyone uses, or does it make more sense to do ones that are sort of more, we have different images for different groups because, there we go. Took long enough. Because that way you're only seeing the application that you need. It also helps us deal with licensing issues potentially. If we're licensed for certain seats for a particular application, we can control how many seats are being used on. So those things come into play. So again, using the app, we saw already. We saw that. We saw that. We saw that. I'll just zip through these. Okay. Ooh. Again, the web app. I did that just so I can get through that. We saw, again, it's just like, it's going to any other web. It looks pretty much the same once you get into it. Okay. And again, the big issue on that is you can't access peripherals like you can when you're on using the desktop client. That's the big difference. Okay. Our other tool is called VCL, and VCL is what we're using for our Linux virtual labs, and right now it's not working, so I'm not going to bring it up now, but basically it is a web-only, there's What it does is it requires that you access it through the web to sign on to it, and you have to create your reservation with it. But then you need, on your computer, you need a remote desktop client application, and these are freely downloadable. There are different ones. On a Mac, you use the Microsoft Remote RDC client, it's called, and on Windows you use, what is it on Windows that you use? Just RDC?
RDP. Yeah.
RDP. You just use the RDP, and it will run on an iPad as well. I've done it there as well, and it runs in that environment. There are nice, pretty good instructions actually under the help menu. So if I I can actually start it up. bcl.ncf.edu. Okay. You basically have to log in with your ID. It'll let me get this far, and I can make a reservation. And I can look at current reservations if I have any, and I make one. And then again, I could pick whichever lab we have. At this point, we only have one Linux lab set up, but we could create others. And when do you want this reservation? One of the things about this is kind of cool is you can say, I don't need this now, but I need it like at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So you can sort of put your reservation in. Okay, how long do you need it for? In this, we have it set to give between 30 minutes, 2 hours. Again, we can tweak those settings.
Right. So that's one of the main pros about this application is that you can make the reservation ahead of time. Say you want it 2 days from now, where in the VDI you can't. It's basically you get 3 hours. So the VDI is not really designed for a lab environment, but we've kind of made it to be able to function as a lab environment.
So what's nice about this is for a lab, it's great because you can say, hey, I need to get in there tomorrow at 10 o'clock for 2 hours. And again, you don't need to go there. There could be your dorm room, your desk, wherever. So we don't need to, this will run anywhere. You'll notice it says reservation failed. We're having some issues right now getting into it, but I'd be able to make my reservation, and then I'd open up this RDP or remote desktop client and run there. Again, no access to local hardware?
No.
No. So again, you'd have to use something like Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that to save it, but again, that's probably just good practice anyway, instead of, working on the local machine. So, and there is actually good help here to Robert's question before. There's actually some help built into here, which is what is VCL, what are the setup instructions, how do I make a reservation, how do I connect, how do I extend them, I'm not sure we let you do that, and reservation timeouts. So there's some information about that. What happens with this is it will give you basically a password, a one-time password that works with your user ID, and use that. It's a session password, so you can use that password for that session. So you just have to, what would happen if the reservation system was working, it would have come back and say, hey, your reservation's here, here's your password, here's the IP address actually that you use, because it gives you an IP address. So you get a network address of 10.something.something.something. And this only works at this point on campus. It is a local address, it's not broadcast address. So this only works on campus at this point. In theory, I guess you can come through the VPN.
Yeah, in the new version, they're going to be able to make it available off campus.
Off campus. So at this point, we can't do this, but we're about to go through some upgrade processes here, so hopefully get there. And again, when you're done, you can log out. There are some preferences, which are basically what name do you want. How do you want, what resolution do you want for your screen? Do you want to use the speakers? Which could be useful, depending what software you're running on here. And then some general preferences. So, okay. So some issues or futures with any kind of virtualization. One of the things that we've been talking about here is I keep saying, and after 3 hours your stuff is gone, or after 2 hours your stuff is gone. That's because we're using what are called non-persistent desktops. Our desktops don't survive session to session to session. Ideally, you really like is what's called a persistent desktop, which is that it would actually save that copy of what you did, and when you logged in again, it would bring it all back. There are tools that do that. There are things called desktops. Desktop as a service is a growing area now. Amazon has something called Workspaces that does this. It's a really nice product, but it's $35 a seat per month. So that gets kind of pricey. And they only offer persistent desktops. They don't offer the non-persistent. It's really nice because it's a hosted environment. You configure it, but you don't have to worry about having the server infrastructure for it, which is the other issue here, is that in order to run this type of environment, the Verizon one that we have or the VCL one, you need the hardware for it. You need the server hardware and network infrastructure and storage infrastructure in place to do it. So it's not free in any sense of the word. You do need that infrastructure behind it, and you need the licensing. For VMware, you need licensing, and for the applications, you obviously need to work out what your licensing is in terms of applications. Is this that you're allowed to run this environment? Some licenses explicitly say, no, and we have to observe those licenses as well. Questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. When we have put Logic Pro into one of these, so that all those students could just dial into that instead of having to use the virtual machines.
In the case of Logic, we couldn't because you notice that that's a Mac app, and you notice there's no virtualization of Mac apps. The reason for that is Apple doesn't allow OS X to be virtualized, except on their own hardware, and you have to have a license, and it's very restricted. That's basically you can use VMware and create like a second desktop, but you can't generally set a server-based version of OS X. So for something like Logic, no, but there are other applications where we certainly could do that and give students access to applications.
But nothing Mac.
Nothing Mac, no. And even again, things like Office and such, we have to look at the licensing and make sure that we're complying with licenses on these other applications. In terms of number of that are available in general and how many are in use at a time. Some of our licenses are specific machine hardware. Others are concurrent session. And concurrent session is usually fine because this actually makes it very easy to control concurrent session. But it makes it, if it's the other type of license, it's problematic.
Like with GIS, we had a certain number of
Right, seats.
seats for that. So the virtual one, how many seats is that?
Well, we now have a site license for GIS, so we're perfectly cool to run the GIS software
That's basically unlimited seats
for our size institution.
within the NCF.
Yep.
Yeah, we offer
Right.
the GIS license and also SPSS and SAS.
Right. The other thing is that in addition to like SAS and PSS and GIS, GIS also has like an online version as well, which you don't even need to use any of this stuff. You can just go to the GIS website, online version of that. So again, more and more things are clearly moving cloud-based. It doesn't make sense to us to have a lot of hardware. Ideally, we would be able to do something like one of these desktops as a service through something like an Amazon or some other provider, but the costs at this point are just prohibitive. Again, $35 a month is kind of pricey. What's nice about it is, again, it's used a lot in corporate worlds now because you can log into any computer and get your desktop, and the companies can maintain security because you have to be able to log in and go through their security profiles and tools in order to get to that desktop. So you're not carrying this computer necessarily with that software on it. You have to access it. The other downside is obviously you need network access. So no network access and you don't have access to these things. So if you want to sit out in the middle of the field in a spot where there's no network, you're not getting online. So, but
Don't go to these.
yeah, don't go to ACE and try to do this on Wi-Fi in someone's office. So, any other questions? Thanks for coming.